Hey guys, welcome to Unit 6 Notes 1. We are going to take what we know about factoring and we're going to use that to solve quadratics. So, first things first, it's going to be super important right here. You need to be set equal to 0 before you can factor. So if it is not equal to 0, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and move whatever's on that side to the other side. Okay, so whatever might be on the right or on the left, and move it to the other side so that you are equal to 0. Okay, so you have to get set equal to 0 first. Then you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna do that steps to factor. Basically, you're gonna say, if there's something squared, you're gonna look for a GCF. If there's no GCF, you're gonna go straight into that X in that box. From there then, since you're set equal to 0, you're trying to figure out what values would I plug in for X that would make that parenthesis or that factor 0, okay? So you would set each factor equal to 0 and solve them. You've seen this before. We did this when we were kind of finding those EVs, okay? We set them equal to 0 and we solved them. This is the same idea. Then you could check by plugging your answers back in to make sure that it actually makes the equation equal 0. Okay, so if you're a person who really likes to go and make sure that they did the right thing on their quiz, they want to make sure they have the right answer, you can take your answer and plug it back in and see if that sets you equal to 0 or not. Okay, so let's kind of look at this. The words don't mean a lot to us, but let's look at some examples. First things first, I want to see if this is set equal to 0. Well, I see it equals 0 right here. So therefore it is. I don't have to do anything to get it set equal to 0. Then you want to look and go through your factoring. So you're going to ask yourself, y squared plus y minus 20, do they have a number or a variable in common that I can pull out right away? No GCF for this problem. But since something is squared, we're going to go into the X in the box, just like we've been doing all the time. So I do a times c on the top, so negative 20 on the top, b on the bottom, 1. Two numbers that multiply to negative 20, add or subtract to 1. Well, 5 minus 4. So I'm going to rewrite this as y squared, 5y, negative 4y, and negative 20. This is nothing new. This is just the exact same thing you've been doing. So y squared and 5y both have a y in common. Negative 4y and negative 20 both have a negative 4. Y squared and negative 4y both have a y. And 5y and negative 20 both have a 5. So if I were writing this out, basically I would have y plus 5, y minus 4, and that's equal to 0. So just like if you were trying to find your EVs, you're going to take this first thing, y plus 5, set it equal to 0, and solve for y. So I'd subtract 5, so I get y would equal negative 5. That is going to be one of my first answers. I'm going to do the same thing with the second parenthesis, y minus 4 equals 0. Add 4 to both sides, so y would equal 4. If I went and checked, if I plugged negative 5 back in up here, so if I did negative 5 squared plus negative 5 minus 20, if I plugged this straight into my calculator exactly like you see it, you should get it equal to 0. And the same thing with that 4. If I were to plug that 4 in, I would get 4 squared plus 4 minus 20, and that should get me equal to 0. Let's go ahead and follow our steps for this. So first things first, am I equal to 0? In this problem, I am set equal to 0, so I'm done with that one. Then I would go ahead and I would say, is there a GCF? So in this problem, there's no GCF, and there's also no x squared, so I don't even need to factor this. So I'm just now going straight down to the thing of set each of the parentheses equal to 0 and solve. So I'd have x plus 4, and I'd want to equal that to 0. So I would minus 4. So I have x is going to equal negative 4. And then I'm going to do the same thing with that other parenthesis, 3x plus 2 equals 0. I would subtract 2 first. So I'd be 3x equals negative 2. Now I don't want to know what 3x equals. I want to know what x equals, so I have to divide by 3. So x is going to equal negative 2/3. Now, sometimes you're going to have this number out front that also has a variable with it. Just remember, like your EVs, like you guys were pros at those EVs. If that was a variable, You told me that I had to be 0. In this situation, since there's no variable, we just kind of ignore it, and I just have these 2 answers. So however many variables you have, though, in your equation, it could be 2, it could be 3, okay, it could be as many as we need, but that's how many x equals that you would need. Let's look at number 3 here. First thing I want to figure out is, am I set equal to 0? Well, in this situation, I'm set equal to 35. So I know that I want to move this 35 over to the other side. So to do that, since it's a positive 35, I need to subtract 35 from both sides. Now, 35 does not have a variable with it, so I cannot put it together with the a squared or the a. So I'm going to be left with a squared minus 2a, and I'm just going to put that minus 35 right on the end. And those are canceled out, so now I'm set equal to 0. Then I'm going to ask myself, do I have a GCF? Okay, so in this problem, I do not have a GCF, but I see a squared, so I know that I have to do the x in the box for this. So a times c to the top, b on the bottom. 2 numbers that multiply to 35, but add or subtract to 2. I'm going to do negative 7 and 5. I'm going to rewrite those 4 terms inside the box. So I have a squared, negative 7a, 5a, and then negative 35. So a squared and 5a gives me a. Negative 7a and negative 35, they all have a negative 7. A squared and negative 7a both have an a. 5a and negative 35 both have a 5. So if I were to write this, I'd have a minus 7, a plus 5, and those are set equal to 0. So since I'm solving this, I'm going to take each piece and set them equal to 0 and solve. So a is going to equal 7. And then a plus 5 equals 0. Subtract 5. So a would equal negative 5. All right, let's look at number 4 here. First things first, am I set equal to 0? I'm not, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to subtract 2 and move that over to the other side. So I'm going to minus 2, minus 2. So I have 6w squared minus 14w. Negative 10 minus 2 is negative 12. Now I'm set equal to 0. I can ask myself, is there a GCF? Yes, these all have a 2 in common. So we're going to divide everything by 2. So I'm actually going to have 3w squared minus 7w minus 6 equal to 0 now. Now I see something squared, so we need to do our x in our box. So a times c to get the top number, so negative 18 on the top, b on the bottom, negative 7. I have negative 9 and 2. So I'm going to rewrite my 4 terms, the 3 minus these, but with these 2. So I have 3w squared, negative 9w, 2w, and negative 6. So 3w squared and negative 9w both have a 3w in common. 2w and negative 6 both have a 2. 3w squared and 2w both have a w. Negative 9w and negative 6 both have a negative and a 3 in common. So I would rewrite this as 2, because you remember, don't forget your brother or sister that you brought to the mall. And then I would have w minus 3, 3w plus 2, set that equal to 0. And now I can go ahead and take each parenthesis or each variable and set that equal to 0 and solve it. If you're getting to the point where you can kind of see these different answers, you do not have to do this extra piece of like showing me the work of setting it equal to 0 and solving it. You can go ahead and just show me your answer. Okay, so I have 2 variables. I need 2 answers. Those are good. Again, I could double check. I could take this 3 and I could plug it back into this original problem and see if in this situation, if I plug it in here, I'd have to equal 2 instead of 0. If I plug it in here, then I know that I would have to be equal to 0. So keep that in mind. You can always check your answers. Number 5, 16x to the third minus 25x. Is it equal to 0? Yes, it is. Do they have something in common I can take out right away? Yes, they both have an x. So I'd have x times 16x squared minus 25 equal to 0. So I'm going to look in my parentheses. They both, there's something squared there, so I need to do the x in the box. So this is my A, this is my C, so I'm going to be left with negative 400. B in the bottom gives me 0, so I'll have 20 and negative 20. So I'm going to have 16x squared, 20x, negative 20x, and negative 25. I need to pull GCFs out. So 16x squared and 20x both have a 4x in common. 20x and negative 25 both have a 5 in common. 16x squared and 20x, 4x. Negative 20x and negative 25 gives me negative 5. So GCF that I had out front was x, and then I'd have 4x plus 5, 4x minus 5 equal to 0. So this is where I said, like, you could have something out front here. If I gave you this and I said, what's the EV for this piece right here? You all would scream at me 0, because what you're technically doing is taking that little piece, setting it equal to 0 and solving. Well, there's nothing to solve, so that's one of my first answers. Then I'm going to do the next one, 4x plus 5, set it equal to 0 and solve. So subtract 5, divide by 4, so x would equal negative 5/4. I know that then I could take this one, 4x minus 5, set it equal to 0, and that's just basically going to give me the positive version of what I just solved. So I have 3 x's up here and 3 answers, so I know that I'm good. All right, last one here, number 6. First things first, am I set equal to 0? I'm not. There is a 12m, so I need to move this over to that side. So since it's a positive right now, I'm going to subtract it. And then I'm going to look. I have an m squared, an m, and a variable, or sorry, a constant. I can't put any of those things together, so I'm going to have 4m squared minus 12m plus 9 equals 0. I always just kind of write it in that order. M squared, m, nothing. M squared, m, nothing. It just kind of gets us in the habit because we've seen that so much. So now since I'm set equal to 0, I can say, do they have a GCF? No GCF, but something's squared. So we're going to have to factor it with our x in our box. So 4 times 9 is 36, negative 12 on the bottom. I'm going to get negative 6 and negative 6. So I have 4m squared, 6m, sorry, negative 6m, negative 6m, and 9. So 4m squared and 6m both have a 2m in common. Negative 6m and 9 have a negative 3. Remember, since this is negative, that's why I'm pulling a negative out. 4m squared and negative 6m have a 2m in common. And a negative 6m and a 9, I'm going to pull out a negative 3, because again, since this is negative, that's why that negative comes out. So I would factor that into 2m minus 3, 2m minus 3 equals 0. So now we can set each of them equal to 0. So plus 3, 2m equals 3, divide by 2, m equals 3 halves. And then since this would be the same thing, I know that I don't have to rewrite all that out again. I can just write 3 halves. All right, you guys, that is the notes for today. Okay, this is going to be the same thing that you're going to do for the next 2 days. So if you get stuck, you have a question, please stop and ask me before moving on to the assignment.